So how are we supposed to know if a person will be receptive to us? Now, I think there are 3 things you should consider. Hello, good people. This is Joanna with Harmonious.Balance. For your consideration today, constructive feedback. What is it? Who should give it? And how to receive it? The reason I want to talk about this is that giving and receiving constructive feedback is probably one of the most challenging and uncomfortable aspects of communication that we all face to some degree. On the giver side, there seems to be what I call the Simon Cowell effect. Yes, I'm talking about the original judge on American Idol, Simon Cowell. Those who watched either loved him or hated him. He didn't mince words. He didn't spare feelings. Those who loved him seemed to admire him for how he gave feedback. And to me, it seemed like more people aspired to be like him. They wanted to be the ones that called it like they saw it without any fear of backlash. And in my view, just observing others, I could see egos take over and having the courage to say what they think everybody else is thinking but afraid to say. But you know what? Maybe they weren't afraid to say it. They may have seen that it wasn't their place to say it, or they knew there was no upside to saying it. In any case, what is constructive feedback? This is also once understood to be constructive criticism. But criticism carries a negative connotation. The word feedback is more neutral because there's all kinds of feedback. But really the operative word here is constructive. To be constructive means that the goal is to build, develop, or advance. The person on the receiving end should leave the conversation with a sense that they weren't just given a tongue lashing, but they leave the conversation knowing that all is not lost. They leave the conversation knowing that they can move forward, recover, grow, and improve, and still be successful with the proper resources and support. They shouldn't leave the conversation unsure of the giver's intentions, and they shouldn't leave the conversation feeling like they were on the receiving end of the giver's ire. So who should give constructive feedback? In my opinion, lots of people give their input and feedback when they really shouldn't. Now, I say this because while everyone has an opinion and may have helpful insight, it's only as good as it's received. And there are people that we are more receptive to and others that we are not. And there may even be circumstances where we can be more receptive and other circumstances where we're less receptive even to the same person. So how are we supposed to know if a person will be receptive to us? Now, I think there are 3 things you should consider. Our proximity to the person, our credibility on the matter at hand, and our stake in the matter. So let's talk about those 3. First, our proximity to the person is all about the type of relationship we have with the person. And there needs to be a mutual understanding and agreement of that proximity. For example, you may have been close with someone back in the day, but present day, you actually aren't that close. So based on your current proximity, you might not be receptive to certain opinions and feedback because that person really isn't up to speed on what's happening with you. Proximity matters because we can better discern the person's intentions, and we already have confidence that the person is only looking out for our best interests. You wouldn't walk up to someone you barely know and tell them that their outfit doesn't flatter them and then offer suggestions, would you? Whereas your close friends and your loved ones can strongly suggest that you change clothes before heading out the door, and you'll actually really consider what they have to say. That's what I mean by proximity. Number 2, our credibility on the matter at hand. If the receiver deems you credible by way of your expertise, experience, education, what have you, they will be more receptive to what you have to say. If the receiver does not consider you to be credible, then they will not be receptive to what you have to say. And in personal relationships, they might actually tell you exactly why they won't listen to a word you have to say. For example, those who are parents typically don't want to hear advice from those who are not parents. Now, your proximity might outweigh your credibility if you're super close and they trust you. But if you lack both proximity and credibility, then your chances of being well received are slim to none. It's also important to note that you may in fact be credible, but it's how the receiver views your credibility. One way to gauge if they value your opinion is if they actually ask you for it. They usually preface their question with, you're an entrepreneur. What do you think about such and such? Now, if you are indeed credible and the receiver knows it, and they don't ask you, it's safe to assume they don't want your feedback. And they certainly don't want it unsolicited. Force-feeding feedback is a recipe for disaster. So number 3, our stake in the matter. Does the outcome of the matter have any real bearing on you and your world? If the answer is yes, then you should probably be a part of the conversation. If the answer is no, then you probably should not be a part of the conversation. And if you choose to insert yourself and the answer is no, then it probably won't go over well. Now on to the last piece of the discussion, how to receive constructive feedback. Well, the receiver should consider the exact same 3 things: the giver's proximity, credibility, and stake in the matter. But first, receivers, we always have to brace ourselves to hear some things that may be hard to hear. Constructive feedback is always about growth and development, which means that the focus is usually on a deficit, a weakness, something that doesn't make us feel good. Now notice I said we need to brace ourselves, not put a guard up and become defensive. Brace yourself as in know that what you're about to hear is going to sting. But you're not going to let your emotions take over. You're going to subordinate your emotions to the giver's proximity, credibility, and stake. Now on the proximity front, do you know for sure that this person does not mean you any ill will? That they really are only looking out for what's in your best interest? On the credibility front, if you found them to be credible enough to give you feedback, don't turn on them and now view them as less credible because they say something that you don't want to hear. And lastly, when it comes to the giver's stake in the situation, what that means is that what happens with you impacts them. And I'm talking about beyond just an emotional impact, like I don't want to see you hurt. What it means is that you cannot be self-centered because what you do has a significant impact on other people. You should respect and seriously consider their perspective. So I talked about who should give constructive feedback and how it should be received, but I didn't talk about how to give it. That's a whole video unto itself. So I'll come back with another video and probably take on some scenarios. If you have something for me to tackle, leave a brief scenario in the comments. Well, that's all for now. Please remember that my intention is never to be messy or controversial. My intention is to share these ideas with the hope of making a difference for the better. Please take my thoughts for what they are worth to you, as I simply offer them for your consideration. I will see you later, good people.